to a special edition of Monte The Pharoah with Mike Monte, along with the player on a Christmas day. How are you, sir? Thanks for
I'm doing
joining me.
great. I'm remote from Minneapolis via way of Playerville.
What are you doing in Minneapolis, bro?
Visiting my son and his wonderful family, my two grandbabies, his wife Alex, my grandsons Elijah, and my granddaughter Lila. I'm a bit worse for wear today from too much food consumption and maybe a little bit of alcohol as well.
How's it changed from Florida to Minnesota, man?
You know, honestly, the weather isn't that much different. I expected 20 below when I got here. It's probably maybe 10 degrees colder. I think it's like mid 40s.
Not bad.
So,
not bad.
yeah, I'm kind of hoping I get lucky the rest of the week and I don't get caught in a blizzard. Oh, very nice. You know, it's kind of refreshing.
Nope. You didn't catch any flight delays or anything like that?
Nope.
Not bad. Not bad.
Nope.
And how was your holiday with your family, with your grandkids and all that?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. It's, you know, they live too far away, but you know, thank God I have the ability to come see them.
Good for you. Good for you. So anyway, I wanted to do a quick little get together. I went to the movies for the first time since before COVID. So total drastic change for me, right? Movie theaters have totally changed. Now you got these relaxing recliners. They serve food to you at your chair. They're heated chairs. Did you know all this was going on?
No. So I went to a place like that about 5 years ago in Tampa, and it cost, I think, like, I don't know, $25. What does that go for now?
Tickets were like 15 or 16,
That's
maybe 18. Maybe it was 18. Well, considering 6 years ago, I think they were like 12, or maybe I'm wrong. I can't even remember.
You're talking to a guy who in 1976, my local movie theater charged 76 cents.
Yeah, how do you like that?
Yep.
Times have changed, my friend.
Absolutely.
So I was very excited for the Iron Claw. When I mean very excited, I was looking forward to this movie, right? So I wanted to go back and forth with you and, discuss a little WCCW with you and the Von Erichs before we actually, because I know you haven't seen the movie yet.
Have not.
But I'll run it by you a little bit. We'll discuss it. But what was your experience with WCCW?
I obviously grew up with WWF. And then I think the second promotion I ever saw was NWA Hollywood with our good friend John Tolos and Jabba Rook, a.k.a. Johnny Rods. But I'm guessing around 81, 82. I'm trying to think even which network. I think it was USA maybe. And I got introduced to the WCCW, World Class Championship Wrestling from Dallas. And I really liked it. I mean, it was different than what I was used to seeing. But, I mean, the stars they had, the Von Erichs, they had Brian Adias, who was on your show. They had some guy named the Dingo Warrior, who kind of went on to be a big name in the wrestling business. I mean, the Von Erichs were rock stars. I mean, and the Freebirds. I mean, they're just like the list goes on and on of the stars that were in that promotion. I mean, really, considering it wasn't that huge of a promotion, the talent, I think, was incredible.
Well, I just remember, right? So, actually, like you, WWF guy or WWF guy to eventually WWE. But then, you'd get cable, and then you had Georgia Championship Wrestling. And like you also, I would watch NW. At the time, I didn't know it was NWA Hollywood. I just remember it was NWA from Los Angeles Coliseum.
The Olympic Auditorium, yes, sir.
Right, yeah. With Adorable Adrian Street, Giant Goliath, right? Black Gordman, yeah, that whole crew.
Mil Mascaras.
Mil Mascaras, Das Lucaras, right? So I can't remember all the names. I'm just trying to think. The Guerreros, right? So
Victor Rivera eventually went out there.
So that was always pretty cool. And then the WWF were also on that channel, and they would play the show in Spanish. Like the interviews, I think, the telecast was in Spanish, but the interviews, like when it broke and they were in front of the ring talking about their future matches, were always in
right.
And it was pretty cool because it was always different, right? Because he made it special for that thing. But I remember WCCW, man, and the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, and I was in awe. And Kerry Von Erich, I was in awe of Kerry Von Erich, and always followed his career after that and followed WCCW. In fact, I would say that I liked WCCW almost as much as I liked WWF.
I gotta agree with you. And Von Erich, I mean, I always say that the biggest two what ifs were Gino Hernandez and Magnum TA. You got to kind of add Kerry to that list, right? I mean, if he had kept himself a little bit, cleaner and he hadn't gotten in that motorcycle accident, what kind of career would he have had? Not that he had a bad one anyway, but
Well, he was NWA champion. He was Intercontinental champion. But yeah, I agree. He certainly could. And I guess he was the Texas heavyweight champion. And eventually, I guess, what they became USWA. So then he was USWA world champion at some point too, wasn't he? But
yeah.
The point is, you're right on the mark. Kerry Von Erich did not reach his potential. At all. I mean, no matter what he had as a title, he just did not reach his potential.
And the look, I mean, I would say maybe the best physique in the history of professional wrestling, if not, like, definitely on the Mount Rushmore, I think.
Well, it's funny. I have this DVD, and I would love to put it on the channel. Long time ago, I ordered this DVD. I guess this guy played drums for the Freebirds for Bad Street. And I guess they had a band, like the Freebirds had an
Right.
album, and it's a whole bunch of clips of everything that was going on. And a couple of things they discussed. One was Vince McMahon had plans to make Michael PSA the world's heavyweight champion, which I just don't believe. Could
I have
never
a hard time
imagine
buying
it.
that, but
Me too. But I did hear that Vince called Fritz before Hogan and wanted Kerry to be the WWF champion, and Fritz wouldn't let him go.
now that would be a little bit more believable than Michael Hayes.
I think at the time too, Benny, like when we first started watching that, there weren't physiques. Like, look, Kerry was Arnold Schwarzenegger to me in wrestling. I mean, that guy did have like the perfect body, I thought. But as we got older, right? Yeah, you said Dingo Warrior. He was as big as Kerry Von Erich. Tony Atlas as big as Kerry Von Erich.
Right.
So and as it got advanced, yeah, all these guys just started, Road Warriors, right? But Kerry was like a little before that. I remember. I could have my timelines wrong, but that's what I remember it as.
But unlike most of those guys, the guy could work. I mean, he really could work in the ring.
I thought he was excellent. I thought his mic skills were okay at best, but he didn't need it, in my opinion. He just had it.
Yeah, he had the charisma. Funny you said, like, you were talking about him a couple of days ago. I was watching on YouTube a clip of it was David and Kerry being interviewed in Florida by Gordon Soley, and they were heels down there. And I just got a kick out of it. I mean, they were pretty, it was just standard heel promo stuff, but they were good. I mean, they got heat.
So, who are they feuding? Wow, who are they feuding with?
I'm not even sure. Not even sure.
I do remember David being a bad guy down in Florida. I do remember that.
Yeah, David he came in, and I think he won the Florida Championship or the Southern Championship or both. Probably won both. And then Kerry came in after that. And I think this interview was actually introducing Kerry. This is my younger brother, Kerry. And Solely was saying, well, is there going to be any rivalry? And, trying to cause a little bit of heat between the two of them. And they didn't buy it. I mean, it's classic heel stuff. It was really, really good, though. I was surprised.
So before we get into the movie, though, let me ask you this. When you heard about the Von Erichs, you started catching on. Which Von Erich did you think? Because, the story goes that David was the guy. I never saw it that way myself. I understand what the wrestlers feel. I get that. What were your thoughts?
I think he was supposed to be the guy. I think that was more Fritz's doing than anything else. But, I mean, he really wasn't around that long. I mean, when did he die? 25?
Yeah, pretty young. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, another one. We'll never really know, but I saw several of his matches. I think I saw a couple against Harley Race, and I thought he was good. I honestly thought Kerry was way better, though.
How about Kevin?
Kevin he was good, and he was good in the ring. I don't think he was very charismatic like Kerry. And I mean, he had
a good-looking guy. He had a good-looking guy, though, right, Benny?
Yeah. I mean, he was well built. The whole barefoot thing, though, that was kind of weird. I don't know. I mean, I think he was. He would have he did have a decent career, but I couldn't see him like being the headliner or carrying a promotion. Where I could have seen Kerry. Kerry really is the one that I could have. And then I think Mike was just way too small.
Well, it's funny. Before I was just looking at a picture of the four of them. Mike was a tall guy. He wasn't built, but he
Right.
didn't seem like a small guy. I mean, he did when you watch the matches, I guess, but he wasn't overly small. Let me put it that way, especially today's wrestling world, anyway.
Yeah, I'm interested in because we've chatted about this offline already, and what your feelings are about the movie versus the reality of the Von Erich family. Because I mean, you talk about a story that needed to be told. I mean, what better wrestling story is there than this?
So let's get into it, right? You haven't seen it yet, and I'm looking forward to you seeing it. But I'm going into this with very high expectations, right? Because just like you said, it was a story that could be told. Now, was I worried that it was going to be just made for wrestling fans? Yes, because again, when I look at the great wrestling movies, right, The Wrestler is clearly the best by far.
The
And the
wrestler?
story, yeah, and the story in The Wrestler isn't really around wrestling, right? It's around everything else: his daughter, the stripper, his job. Of course, there's wrestling involved, but it's the back story. And I've seen too many movies where the wrestling is the front story. So that was my concern. What are your thoughts about what I'm saying about The Wrestler?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, the wrestler really. I mean, obviously the guy was a wrestler, but the whole premise of the movie was this guy was a professional wrestler. He did have. I mean, he was a main eventer. Probably made some good bucks, and now he's scooping out potato salad at a deli and dating a hot stripper named Marissa Tomei.
There you go.
That's the worst thing in the world, right?
Right, exactly. And
But
then,
no, I
I
mean,
think
it
about
really is. It was more the fact that he was a wrestler had some bearing, but it was more of a to me, it was a story of somebody who was a bigwig in what they did, and now they're not such a bigwig, and they're trying to adjust to life as a smaller fish, in the sea of life, I guess.
exactly. And the trials and tribulations of the guy can't recover from it. And then he obviously has a heart attack. But again, so going into this, I knew the movie could go both ways, but I said, you really can't screw up this movie, right? Because the story is there. Um, so I'll give you a few things and I'll ask you to weigh in on what I saw. So basically, uh, they kind of introduce you to Fritz, right? In black and white, he's wrestling. You know, if you're not a wrestling fan, you don't know it's Fritz, number one. So you just see some guy wrestling. So I always look at it from the perspective of someone who's not a wrestling fan that goes to this movie, right? Someone who wasn't a wrestling fan can enjoy The Wrestler. Do you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So in this case, it was like it started off that way. I was like, all right, whatever. And then it really starts focusing on Kevin and Kevin becoming the NWA champion, right? They don't talk about Jack, the youngest son, until later on in the movie dying. You find out later on when Kevin's talking to his girlfriend. And look, so I'm not going to give them, but there's really nothing to give away, right? So I'm not really giving away any kind of story. Everybody knows how this started, how it ends, and everything in between. But my first point was there's way too much wrestling. As a moviegoer, what interest do I have watching actors making believe they're a wrestler, right, Von Erich, against actors who are making believe they're the Freebirds?
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some of it, but I mean, it really kind of dilutes the story. What you really want to do is tell the story. You want the wrestling to help tell the story, but you don't want the wrestling to overpower the story.
And you know what? That's a great comment. And in my opinion, it overpowered the story. I mean, I don't think they established the relationship between the brothers enough. There's points where they're trying to establish it, where the brothers defend Michael and Michael's being picked on by Fritz. You know what I mean? But you don't, for me, I didn't see that ultimate brotherhood there where they could have drove that a lot more. In fact, I got to tell you, and again, I don't want to tear anybody apart, but I thought whoever wrote that screenplay did an awful job.
Yeah, I mean, what it really boils. I mean, forget about wrestling. You're talking about a bunch of brothers that, at the urging of the father, went into the family business, and obviously there's going to be a lot of infighting, just like it would be in real life, between the brothers. Who's going to be the top dog, and that's really the story you want to tell.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a point where Kevin, becomes a Texas heavyweight champion, and Kerry's at the U.S. Olympics. So you don't see Kerry until about 45 minutes into the movie, right? So part of the problem I see a lot of fans writing about it. So I'm going to kind of go the opposite way, is that they felt that the actor who portrays Kerry was way too small. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I don't know that that's a deal breaker. Again, you're telling a story. You can properly. I mean, if they structure it right, I don't think it really that makes that much of a difference.
And APB, American Protection Bureau, voted #1 best on Long Island for all your security needs. Call 631-390-9050. That's 631-390-9050. APB.
Would it have been better if there was somebody, maybe a little bit bigger? Yes. But I mean, to me, is it a deal breaker? No. Again, what you're trying to do is tell a story. The important thing is in how accurately the actor depicts the real person. I think it's how accurately they capture the essence of who the guy was and what the relationships were, because that's really what it's all about.
Well, Benny, I also think too that like Zac Efron got himself in great shape. He plays Kevin Von Erich, but he's not a big guy. So when you see him against real wrestlers, you can see there's a huge difference. So I think they had to make sure that the other wrestlers were his size, not to
scale it down the size.
Scale it down. So I wasn't so dead set against it at all. But again, I also heard fans say there should have been more focus on Kerry. So I will share this. They show a lot of matches. They show him against the Freebirds. They show him and Brody wrestling, right? So when Kerry finally, David dies, right? And they don't even show you the trip to Japan. They show him get sick, which is not a bad scene at a wedding. But when David dies, Kerry and Kevin, one of them is going to wrestle Flair for the title. And the father flips a coin, which you find out later on is a trick coin. So he made sure Kerry got the title shot, not to piss off Kevin. But they don't show the match. You just hear in the background during some kind of scene, a new NWA champion. And I thought to myself, you're going to show all these matches, but this is not the match you're going to show. Probably the most important match of the entire story.
That's very strange, actually, now that you said that.
So
not making good use of the wrestling time. I mean, you could, like you said, if you showed some of that match, that's meaningful to the story.
So then there's and then right after that, and I understand it's movies, and when you write scripts, you got to do certain things. But right after wins the NWA title, he decides to go for a motorcycle ride, and that's where he ends up losing his foot, right? So again, I understand they got to change story. It's not true to fact on everything that goes on here, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of odd, but I guess, again, not a deal breaker, because I mean, it does happen. So I understand that there's, certain things, like I understand Chris was left out of the movie altogether, and I'm not sure why that happened. It's really funny because I probably on Facebook seen 100 reviews of the movie, so I almost feel like I've seen it without even seeing it.
So tell me, what are the reviews of the movie that you're seeing?
A lot of people are saying, like you said, there was, too much, like the Flair promo and the Harley Race promo. Too much time.
Awful.
Too much time. Too much. I mean, you only have so much time. Again, it's like a wrestling match. You only have so much time to tell the story. You got to make best use of the time you have, and that was not a good way to spend the time. Many comments about Chris not being included in the movie at all. I guess a lot of people saying that, and they were disappointed MJF didn't have a bigger role in the movie.
MJF literally isn't even in the movie, dude. He's wrestling with Kevin Von Erich, And unless you're a wrestling fan, you don't even know it's Lance Von Erich, right? He just does a move and he flexes. You don't have, there's no explanation. What's the point of even having him in there? Again, bad storytelling, too much wrestling, right? I heard where the writer said he didn't want to put the Chris story in because it was kind of the same as the Michael story. So he thought they were kind of two characters, together. But I had thought to myself, if you had cut out the Flair promo, the Harley Race promo, and a couple of matches that like broke them down a little tighter, you could have got the whole. Again, they missed on getting the real feeling how close these brothers were.
And why do you want to leave out? I mean, the fact that several brothers died the same way, like it really it adds to the impact of it. So why would you exclude one of them? That I don't get at all.
It does. I will say that they did a good job with establishing Kevin's relationship with his wife, which I thought was good. So that was fine. You find out the wife is a big part of his life, which, unless you're a real Von Erich fan, you don't know that, right? You probably didn't even know he was still married to the lady. So I thought they did a good job there. How do they portray Fritz? They portray Fritz to be rough. I remember when David dies, he gets the boys are drinking beer and he goes, well, we got to move on. Who's going to be the NWA world champion? That's when they flip the coin. So I think they try to push Fritz off as being a bit of an asshole. But it's funny. I had Scott Casey on the show, and Scott Casey was not a Von Erich guy. But you hear mixed stories about Fritz. But, when you talk to Brian Adidas was a very close to Fritz in the family.
I remember him being on your show and being, fairly complimentary towards Fritz.
Right. And I think Fritz was driven and the boys were driven. And I think he was a rough guy, right? He couldn't show his emotions because I will say at the end of the movie, Kevin is watching his sons play football and he starts to cry. He's just sitting there crying and the kids come over and they're like, what's wrong? And he uses the famous line, I used to be the oldest brother of 4, and now I'm not a brother at all.
Wow.
Well, and that, again, that's an emotional statement. It's emotional whenever, yeah. So, when he says that, I guess my point is he says to the boys, I'm sorry, boys, men aren't supposed to cry. And the boys said, we cry all the time, Dad, you can cry. And then he starts crying. So I think they established like Fritz got into the heads of the boys. Like there's no crying in life and there's no crying in wrestling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like overall though, not that it was a bad movie. I mean, I don't know if you remember back in the day, Dick Clark, American Bandstand, they used to have something called Rate the Record. They play a brand new record and then they each had like two kids, hold up a card, I guess on a scale of 1 to 100. So it sounds like you're probably giving it maybe a 75, or am I being?
I would tell you this. It would be a movie that I'd wait to come on Max, right, on HBO, and I'd probably watch it 1 or 2 times at best.
Right.
I thought it was. It's funny. Remember we used to watch wrestling movies back in the day. You remember that movie with Roddy Piper and the Tonga Kid?
Oh, yeah.
I don't forget the name of that movie, right? But it was like made-for-TV movie. I can't remember it at this point, the name of it. If someone knows, please put in the chat. Yeah. But it was at that level, man. It just, to me, it was – they did a disservice to that whole story. They should have really got a real director and writer behind it because they could have did something with this. It could have been an emotional roller coaster. I mean, they'd only established the point that the boys are high on drugs all the time, right? And all of them were, right? I mean, that was the 80s, right? They, you see scenes where they're snorting coke or they're taking some pills, but they don't establish it. Think about the wrestler, right? They establish that this dude's, even after his heart attack, is still partying. You know what I mean? And you're shaking your head and you can't believe he's still doing it,
Yeah. Supposedly the Texas police actually protected them as well. I don't know if that was portrayed in the movie, but in many instances where they found one of the guys high and they somehow got him to the arena. So I'm not sure if that was portrayed in the movie or not. But these guys were legitimate rock stars who were, they were like deity. They were gods. And and I mean, you talk about idolized by women. Geez, I mean, Kerry. I mean, you would I mean, how many women were after that guy?
Yeah, and there's also like one point like where they do justice to the story is when Kevin Kerry is the Intercontinental Champion and he comes and visits home in Texas, and his father starts talking about like they got to put the title on you. Why are they pushing Hellwig? Like who? If you're just like, what is even the point of that comment? In the I felt they were I felt they were like AEW trying to appease the wrestling fan. Like who cares? Like, what does Hellwig have to do? Like with you get my point? Like for what reason does that have to even be brought up in the movie? And then there's a point where he calls Kerry and he says he just wants to die. They're not renewing his contract. And if everybody knows the history, he got released from the WWE. He went back to USWA, where Kevin and him still owned the organization from Fritz and sold it to Lawler and Jerry Jarrett, right? And they still wrestled, and that's where he had those feuds with Jerry Lawler, and he was high as hell during those. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I just felt they did disjustice to the storyline. It's like, hey, you got to keep it like it's in the WWE because that's where wrestling is. I mean, just tell the story. And you don't have to go that deep into it. You know what I'm saying?
The story itself is compelling. The story sells itself. And I think from what I'm hearing, though, is, like you said, the hardcore wrestling fan is going to buy a ticket to see it. But don't you want to attract the casual fan or even like, the non-wrestling fan? And it sounds like they really didn't do anything to do that.
There was 8 people in the theater, man. There was 8 people.
Yeah.
This will be on Max in like 2 months.
Right.
And, look, if people liked it, that's their choice. But when I saw some people like, this was a great movie. No, this wasn't a great movie. It wasn't even a good movie. You could ask my wife. She fell asleep and she was snoring next to me. I had to keep hitting her.
Okay, that's the the casual / non-wrestling fan. I mean, of all the reviews I saw on Facebook, I would say, yours was, your review is pretty much kind of typical of what I saw. I mean, a lot of people weren't even that nice. I mean, nobody gave it a glowing review saying, "Oh, this is a great movie." They really told the story accurately. Most people, because a lot of the people you and I deal with are people in the know, and
Right.
they know what's going on, and they know that they missed the boat.
Again, I'm okay with them altering the storyline so much for movies. You have to, right? The idea when you do that is to keep it more interesting, but the story was already there. If you just would have stayed away from the wrestling, so much from the wrestling, there was a tremendous, there was a storyline between him and his wife, Fritz and his wife, and they just don't even dive into that relationship. It's at one point, she's just very cold and callous, and as the boys are dying, she's getting colder and colder, and eventually she just shuts Fritz out. But that's me knowing what happened. Like, I know the story, but if I'd had no idea, it would just be like all of a sudden she decided not to be bullied by Fritz anymore. That's the way I took it.
Yeah, why don't you want to tell that? Because again, I mean, are you wanting to have 8 people at the theater, or you wanting to draw some fans?
Well, I would tell you this: if it, on a 4-star rating, I would give it a 1.5 stars.
Yeah, that's about right.
And I'm a huge Von Erich guy, right? So I give it 1.5 stars because I love the Von Erichs, right? Kerry Von Erich's one of my all-time favorites. The Von Erichs, WCCW, all those guys from that era. I could interview every one of them because I love them. I love everything about them. I know everything about them. It was like, as a wrestling fan, that was the place to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, considering again that the guy came from a relatively small promotion, it was not that big of a promotion, but that he became a sensation there, and then and I think he translated well into the WWF. I really do. I just think he had too many outside issues.
How come you think Kevin didn't go to the WWF? I heard a story that he tried out and he decided, hey, I don't want to travel, and that could be the case. But I'm surprised he didn't try to bring them in as a tag team together.
Right? I mean? Yeah, that would have worked. I mean, they would have at least been the equivalent of the Killer Bees.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Do you think it was a mistake that Vince wouldn't call him Kerry Von Erich and was calling him the Texas Tornado?
I didn't like that. I mean, I didn't like when they called Barry Windham the Widowmaker either, or Kurt Hennig Mr. Perfect. I mean, any of us with half a brain, I mean, not even half a brain, but, a well-versed wrestling fan, we knew who that was. I mean, don't insult our intelligence.
Well, I got to be honest with you. Mr. Perfect, I liked, right? I liked
I mean,
the gimmick.
the Mr. Perfect gimmick was one of the best ever, but, it was still Kurt Hennig.
Absolutely.
And Barry Windham was
Barry
still
Windham,
Barry Windham.
I totally agree with you. Barry Windham did not have good runs up here. But he said on the interviews he kind of thinks it's his fault. I thought Kerry's run was good here. I think that he must have been high a lot. I mean, my guess is, and that's why the push just stopped. You know what I mean? Or he was over when he got up here, right?
Yeah, but geez, how you wrestle with prosthetic foot? That had to be hard too.
That was amazing. That is amazing. Think about that. That is an amazing feat, right?
I mean, supposedly, and I don't know if this was in the movie as well. Supposedly, he used to shower with his boots on.
They didn't show that. They show him with no foot, or almost half his legs gone, actually. And then they show him that he tries to get back into the ring, and he really works hard to get back into the ring.
Yeah.
Again, the Kerry Von Erich character in the movie, I thought they could have gotten a better choice, but I understand why they went with someone not huge like Kerry was. I get it. I thought Efron did a fantastic job as Kevin Von Erich. The David Von Erich guy, the guy did a pretty decent job. And the Mike Von Erich, I would tell you the most intriguing character in the whole movie was Mike Von Erich.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
He liked rock music, and supposedly like Fritz forced him into wrestling. But I don't know. They did the whole thing where they go through that fairly quick too, right? He breaks his shoulder
in the Middle East, right? Israel, I think.
Right. They don't say that though. They just, he does it, and then he gets the fever, and then, then he's like kind of like not himself anymore. It's like kind of brain frozen, right? So, but Benny, that's about it. I just wanted to go over with you, and just want to thank you for joining. And
my pleasure. It makes me wonder why, a guy like you or a guy like me, or they should have when they make these movies. I think they need a panel of true wrestling fans that can give an objective opinion, and not only say, look, we should be happy there's wrestling in there, but the fact that we know enough about the story to say, well, you know what, there's too much wrestling. Develop the story and just cut some of that wrestling out. They need to hear things like that.
What's amazing to me, man, is the template is written with the wrestler, right? The template is there. It's like, why would you divert so far off that format? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Again, you're watching actors playing wrestlers. All right. Like, I know in The Wrestler, they made sure they didn't get really big guys because Mickey Rourke is not a big guy, right? So they didn't want to make him look like small. So I get what they were doing here also, but they didn't expose Mickey Rourke that much in the ring, right? In the beginning, he starts, and then you find out what happens when they purposely put him in that that with the glass, whatever you want to call it, match. They made it pretty simple, right? So there wasn't really a lot of wrestling. And then after that, you don't see him wrestle the whole movie until the end. Until the end. And again, I don't understand why you would do 5-minute promos with an actor as Ric Flair and an actor like Harley Race. It made no sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, just have Ric Flair say "woo," wearing a nice suit. That conveys the whole thing.
Again, if you're going to show a Ric Flair match, it should have been Kerry's match in Texas Stadium, not Kevin's match. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Right. Absolutely. Totally agree.
So, in my opinion, epic fail. If I would have known it was this, I could have waited for it to come out on Max.
Yeah, you saved me $15.
What do you got coming up, Benny, this week?
Well, let's see. Tomorrow we have Dan and Benny in the ring, and actually we're going to have you on, and we're going to talk about this again, and then maybe do a little bit of recap of the year, year review kind of thing. Wednesday we have Wrestling Remembered with Bruce and what are they, Joe, the defending .30 champion. Finally, man, that guy would have blew a gasket if he didn't win that last time. And And then Thursday, we're going to shoot in the afternoon. We're going to do another episode of the Line Drive Baseball podcast. And then we got the 30 on Thursday, and then, of course, the main show on Thursday night.
All right.
Busy
Sounds
week,
good, guy.
right?
Sounds
No rest
good.
for the weary.
Merry Christmas, and thank you for coming in and discussing,
Yes. Merry Christmas, my
the
friend.
Iron
What a
Claw,
great
my
year. I
friend.
mean, I have a lot to be thankful for. And honestly, being part of the Monte family, being included this year has been one of the highlights of my year, to be honest.
Well, it's been an honor to have you on the channel, man. All right. I'll see you during the week,
All
my
right.
friend.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.